Hi there. Hi, Steve. Kaufman device removal. What does this say? Hi there. Yeah, start up again. My computer is doing funny things. Steve Kaufman here. I posted at my blog. My blog, by the way, is called The Linguist on Language. And I posted there about the views of Stephen Krashen about language learning. And I did a video and podcast, which I do simultaneously. And then I posted about my views of grammar, and I don't think I disagree with Mr. Krashen, who also says that there is a role for grammar learning, but it's a very minor one, and I think it's important to stress this because much of traditional language learning places great importance on grammar instruction, and I pointed out that I believe it's about 1% of the time that I spend. Occasionally I'll review grammar, occasionally I'll check on the, look up on a website for, Portuguese verbs or something like that, but not very often. Mostly I listen and read and review words and phrases. Phrases are pretty key, and phrases embody a lot of the structure and the grammar of a language. Now, in response to this, I had a comment from a person called Liam. And he said that in order to, be able to use the subjunctive in Spanish, or in order to be able to handle the endings of German adjectives, that basically we had a choice. We could either memorize the tables and use them while speaking, constantly referring to them in your head, or not learn the grammar and fool yourself into thinking you're learning the language naturally, which only kids under the age of 5 can do with any proficiency. Now, I'm just amazed at how dogmatic certain people can be. Only people under 5 can do this. And you'll not learn the grammar if you don't memorize the tables. I mean, come on, let's get serious here. First of all, everything depends on your goal. Now, my goal in learning a language is to be able to communicate. To understand when the language is spoken, to understand what I'm reading, to access the literature, to accumulate vocabulary, and when I have enough vocabulary, then I start to feel this need to speak, to test what I've learned, and that's basically the process. It's basically a snowball gathering speed down a long slope, not a very steep slope. So it's a gradual process. And the subjunctive doesn't matter to me, although quite honestly, I find the subjunctive easier than certain other aspects of some of the Romance languages. If I hear it often enough, I wish I were type of structure, you must do this in French or in Spanish becomes subjunctive. You kind of figure it out after a while. But even if you don't get it right, there's people who speak French and don't get the subjunctive right, and they communicate quite comfortably. And I think it's a matter of what you're listening to, who you're listening to, what you're reading. If you get enough of the right kind of input, I think in time, your brain will figure out the subjunctive. But there's nothing wrong with spending 15 minutes reading a little grammar book where they refer to the subjunctive, but you won't retain very much. That's the whole point. This deliberate attempt to study grammar, and I've done it. I've done it for German. Looking at the tables, trying to remember the tables. It's impossible. I can't do it, Liam. I speak 10 languages. I speak German very comfortably. I've done interviews in German with podcasters. I have conversations. I've done business in German. I read German. I have no trouble with German. I make lots of mistakes. Probably not as many as I think I do, but I make mistakes. And I haven't spoken much German for 15 years. Now, if I were there and I lived there for 6 months straight, the number of my mistakes would diminish. I would make fewer mistakes because of the input that I'm getting, not because I'm studying tables. That's my view. So, if we say that our goal is to communicate, to get enough input, and certainly all the reading that I've done on how the brain works would certainly support the view that the brain will eventually figure things out. The main thing is not to discourage the learner. And it's precisely because of the kind of language teaching methods that Liam proposes that most people do poorly at school. The Swedes speak English because they have so much English around them on television and elsewhere. But it's not because of what they learn at school. The schools, with their emphasis on language, on grammar instruction and memorizing tables, they just frustrate everybody because it's not a very efficient way to learn for most people. But I don't deny, Liam, that it's probably for you, if you like doing it that way, I'm sure it is good for you. But you are in the minority, in my experience. The vast majority of people are far better off to be exposed to a lot of enjoyable input at their level that they have selected, struggle a bit with the meaning of some of the words. Things are a little bit fuzzy. They save words and phrases. They keep doing it. They listen, they read, they listen many times. And slowly the language comes into focus. And that is more enjoyable and a more natural way to learn. And that is not limited to people under 5, because I have done it many, many times. And it's interesting, the dogmatic. Now, some people might say that I'm dogmatic. Perhaps I am, but I don't deny the possibility that there are people like Liam. But in my experience, I consider them to be very much the minority. And if I look at research on how the brain learns things, where it's clear that the brain is even from an evolutionary perspective, is not as good in dealing with logical explanations and rules presented to it as it is in naturally identifying patterns and creating its own rules and creating its own labels and making this word locate in, with these neurons and all of this stuff that the brain does naturally, which we are only beginning to understand. But everything I've read about it suggests that the natural way of learning, which Liam derides or claims can only be handled by children under 5, or that otherwise we're deluding ourselves. Well, no, Liam, I'm not deluding myself. I wonder how many languages you speak, but I have learned languages without doing it that way, and I know of other people who have done the same. So that is just a little bit of a response. I thought that Liam was just so dogmatic that I would make a podcast